35mm pocket cameras. They used to be everywhere. I mean, 35mm pocket cameras are what we all took pictures with for decades. And there were so many kinds. I mean, you had, the super cheap disposable ones like this very special PNC Bank camera I have here. And then you had really nice fancy ones for all the dads of the world. And then you had SLR cameras that had different lenses. Like 35mm was photography for many, many years. And once, digital came on the scene, these cameras were, nostalgia items, but kind of worthless. And for many years, you could get, a bucket full of 35mm cameras for nothing. But then something interesting happened over the past few years. Suddenly, pocket 35mm cameras became really, really expensive. Specifically, models like the Nikon 35Ti, for some reason, just exploded in popularity. Famous people were seen using them, but they just became really desirable, cool objects, especially certain ones. Like I mentioned, the Nikon 35Ti is an excellent camera, wonderful to use, pocket camera that also has really high quality. But the problem is it's hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and there's no reason to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a pocket 35mm camera. I mean, if you're looking for high quality imaging, like you want the best quality possible, you don't shoot film, you shoot digital. We shoot film because we love film specifically. Like, it's fun to use, you can get certain types of effects, the grain is great, film is great. There's a lot of reasons to use film, but sheer image quality is not really the number one reason you should be using film. So, with that in mind, if you're looking for a pocket camera, like I like carrying a pocket camera around with me. I like one for travel. I like for, hiking. If I even just have a bag with me, I like to have one I just slip in the bag. If it's winter, I'll even just put a pocket camera in my pocket. So what are you to do if you don't have one in your parents' attic that is any good, and you want a pocket camera that actually gives you a little bit of control of what you're doing and has a good enough lens? We're not looking for the best thing on the planet, but good enough. Well, you have a few options because not every 35mm camera out there is super expensive. In fact, the vast majority of film equipment is outdated. Nobody really wants it. It's pretty cheap. Like, there's a reason why the F6 is super duper expensive, but the F100, which is basically the same camera and the one I shoot all the time, is like 1/20th of the price. It's because if without the name or the cachet of a certain model, people don't really care about the actual camera itself for the most part. So that allows us to kind of sneak in around the edges. So what kind of cameras are you going to find out there once you start looking for 35mm cameras? Well, you're going to find a lot of hot garbage like this, which I say it's garbage, but it has its charms. I actually love disposable cameras. There's a very specific look to them, and I think we all know. I mean, there's still reason why people look back fondly at disposable cameras. I mean, they're just super fun. You point and you shoot. It's great. This is obviously a promotional one, processed before April 2008. A little behind on that. You don't really want to buy a bunch of disposables. For one, they're kind of expensive now, but two, you can also just get something like the Nikon Fun Touch 2. This is basically like a disposable camera, but it is a camera. You don't throw it away after you use it. Besides the creepy name, there's some very basic features like turning the lens on and turning flash on. And that's it. That's all this camera does. But there's a problem with cameras like this. So this is essentially the same guts as something like this. It's a fixed focus lens. It says AF, but it's fixed focus. I've shot this camera before. I know what's really in there. It's basically a fixed focus, super wide angle lens, and it's f4.5, which is okay, I guess. But so we're still looking at the extremes between a Nikon 35Ti, which is way nicer than this, and this, which is kind of crappy but cheap. So what are we to do? Is there any brand name camera that we can get that is as good as a Nikon 35Ti but doesn't cost an insane amount of money? Well, fortunately, there is. The Nikon One Touch series. Now, I love this series of cameras. It's very confusingly named, so I am dealing with a very specific model here, which I believe is the L35AF2. What's hard is that there's nothing on the body that really like says exactly which model of the Nikon One Touch this is, but that's what I believe this one is. And if you're looking for one for yourself, just make sure that everything matches what is on this specific camera if you want the exact one that I'm going to be talking about today. And this camera is awesome because the guts of it, the lens itself, and all the mechanics of it are very similar to the high-end Nikon 35Ti and cameras like that. So what's the difference between this camera and something like this? First off, the lens element is much nicer. This is a 35mm lens, not to be confused with the 35mm format. It's slightly wide angle, but not too wide angle. I find 50mm be a little too, zoomed in, for lack of a better word, and something like 28 to be a little too wide. I find it perfect for like travel, walking around photography. I love 35mm. You also have an f2.8 lens, which allows in quite a bit of light, and that's a pretty solid lens for a 35mm. So if this camera is so great, why isn't it more popular? Well, the main reason is that it has almost zero controls. Like, this is like a Polaroid camera at its most basic. There is no exposure adjustment. You can't set it in a program mode or aperture priority mode. You can't control the shutter speed. You can't control anything on it. It is entirely automatic. So technically, it's a little bit less of a professional tool because of that. But I find that when I'm shooting, just walking around, when I'm just need something in my pocket, I don't really want all that control. I don't need it. I'm just pointing and shooting as quickly as possible. If I'm in a more controlled shoot, I'll have my film SLR, I'll have my Nikon F100, or if I really want to go light, I can get an old Canon Rebel. There's tons of light SLR 35mm cameras that'll give you way more control. But when we're talking about pocket cameras, we don't need control. We just want something that's convenient, compact, yet still high quality. And the great thing is that you can actually trust this camera for the most part. It's going to expose well. It's not going to like just totally biff it like some other cameras can do sometimes. It's a really trustworthy camera. And, model by model is going to depend. You're going to have to shoot one. If you get one in, you're going to have to shoot it, make sure you like it, that it's doing what it needs to do. And you really can't tell on any specific camera until you actually shoot it. But my particular model, and the research I've done with this one and specifically, it's really nice. So the Nikon One Touch, how do you use it? So to turn it on, slide that open and your lens is exposed. Turn it off, shut that. So to load film, it's just this little back hinge here. We're gonna slide that down, open it up. As you can see, it's really simple guts inside. Most of these cameras are, which makes them nice and light. Normally, I really like Fuji's cheapo 400 print C41 film, but since we have a little bit of a global shortage of everything, we're going to be using some Kodak 200, which it's fine. I just think it's a little desaturated for my taste. But so once you put the film in, you're going to want the little nubby thing on technical terms. You're going to want this little thing on the top down here. You're gonna have the film pulled out. You wanna make sure that it's catching on these little like hooks here that grab that. You see film tip, that's the film tip. And once you have this set, you just close it. Make sure that it's closed. This is the little window where you can actually like see what kind of film you have in here. And once you have that loaded in, you're gonna turn on the camera by sliding that open and just press the shutter. And you're gonna see it actually go through the film and advance to the first shot. So yeah, so now you have a film in here and camera's gonna work. Like I said, it's super dead simple, but that doesn't mean the camera is dumb. So one of my major problems with some, modern Polaroid cameras is that when you're taking a picture, you can't see what the focus mechanism is doing. And what's really cool about this camera is just like any advanced camera, you press down halfway on the shutter, and what it's gonna do is two things. First, it's gonna decide of whether or not you need the flash. If it's too dark to expose without flash, it's gonna pop it up automatically. If you want to shoot without flash, even though it thinks you should use flash, just push that back down and you can press down the shutter all the way and it'll shoot without flash. So that's really nice that it'll tell you when you need flash, but you can still override it as easily as pushing that down. The other thing that it's gonna do when you press down halfway is it's actually going to focus, and in the viewfinder, it's gonna be a little hard to see. You see that little thing popping on the viewfinder down there? that's actually your focus. So you can tell if the camera is focusing correctly before pressing down all the way and taking a picture. It's really, really nice that you can tell what the camera is focusing on, because one of the most common issues with any film, you know, Polaroid 35mm, is when it just completely biffs on what it's focusing on. Let's say you have a subject standing in front of like a giant mountainside view. If it focused to infinity, it's gonna just miss your subject entirely. Whereas if you have a viewfinder, you can say, oh, it's focusing to like about 5 feet away from me. I can tell that my subject's in focus and not the background. Because this isn't a SLR. You're not looking through the lens when you're actually using a camera. You're looking through this little window next to it. It's a rangefinder style camera. So framing is not gonna be super precise, but having that little thing in there let you know where it's focusing is really helpful. Also, we have a little light here that's gonna tell you that the flash is on. You can see the little thing here, it flashes off. Click that if you don't want it on. And then once you're done, close it up. And I really like this little cover on here. It's really durable, so you can throw it in a bag and not have to worry about your lens getting all scratched up. This is like a timer. So if you want to do a shutter where, you know, you set the timer and you put it on a tripod and take a selfie, that's there. It's not something I really use, but if that's something you use, it's there. That's about one of the only complicating features of this camera. Otherwise, it's dead simple, which I love. On the bottom here, we have a screw mount in case you want to put it on a tripod. We have this little thing here, which is how you rewind the film once you're done with it. And then we have the battery slot. So this uses just 2 common AA's, which I love. Not anything weird, nothing fancy, just 2 AA's and you're good to go. It lasts a really long time on charge. Like, I use rechargeable batteries and I recharge them just to be proactive every once in a while, but I don't think I've ever killed a set of AA's in this. If you do get this camera and you store it, make sure you take the batteries out so that the battery doesn't explode in the compartment, or make sure you're using rechargeable lithium. But yeah, the Nikon One Touch. I think this is an amazing camera. There are reports that some variants of the One Touch are not quite as high quality as others, and like their lens mechanism. It's probably not a big deal, but if you really want to make sure you're getting the right one, I love this model. I use it. Like I said, I believe it's the L35AF2, but I mean, there's, short of having a Nikon rep tell me what it is, there's nothing on, I mean, there's just nothing on here that has like an actual model number. But you can see, like, when you look at the pictures of the cameras on eBay listings and whatnot, you can pretty much tell which one's what. But this is a camera I take with me. I've taken it to multiple continents. I've kept it in my bag for years. I use it on major shoots. I just absolutely love this camera. I think it's just an awesome alternative to the super expensive 35Ti's of the world. You know, who knows? Maybe once people start buying this gets super expensive. But there are always going to be other cameras out there that have high quality components, but just aren't as fancy as the super fancy cameras. So keep your eye out for those. You know, these are often cheap enough that if you're just, you know, around a flea market, at a Goodwill, anywhere there's just used cameras lying around, like, if you can pick up some cheap ones, like maybe there might be a good one in the bunch. You sometimes just have to shoot and see. But the things to pay attention to are if it's a fixed focus lens or if it's like an actual high quality lens. And then often I find certain brands have better focusing, better exposure. Nikon's a brand that you can really trust, but also Contax, Canons, there's so many good brands out there and they're all totally fine. Chances are your parents probably have something like this in their basement and it probably works great as long as the batteries haven't exploded in it. But yeah, that is pocket 35mm cameras that you don't have to expend a fortune on. Hope you enjoyed this video and happy shooting.